Another major process in my life is writing a book. I wrote a book. It's called Facing Up to It. At the risk of being obvious, it's a play on words. It took me 7 years to write this book. 7 very difficult, grueling years. Now, would it have taken me 7 years had I just sat down and wrote every day, even an hour a day? Probably not. But I had to put every aspect of my life under a microscope. I had to examine my successes, my failures. I had to look at my relationships. I had to look at what worked, what didn't, my regrets, all the people I'd been in touch with at one point and had lost contact with. I read my surgical notes, and then I had to translate them because who knows what all those words mean. My first draft was over 500 pages. One of the best pieces of advice I got from, actually it was the man who encouraged me to write my story down once and for all. He told me, when you get an editor, and you will need an editor, get somebody who knows how to edit, not just someone who says they can edit. And that's what I did. And she made a huge difference. She said, Dawn, first of all, yeah, 500 pages is a little long. Secondly, you have to show people, don't tell them. Now, thankfully, I have enough writing skills that I was able to take her sage advice and say, okay. So I just turned everything into stories and into emphasizing, trying to put people there. And I've had people tell me, it's like, how do you remember all those details? I don't. I don't go so far as to say I made them up, but what I do is I try to put myself, knowing what I know about myself. If I were in that situation, if I were 12 years old in that situation, what would my thought process be? How would I think? What would I say? What would likely be said? And that's what I did. Because I sure as heck don't remember all that detail. But that's the other thing. You hit the highlights of what went on in your life. As for writing, I believe that writing is an important process. Now, for me, it taught me so much about myself. And it taught me about human nature. I decided that taking 7 years to write it was okay, because it just took what it took. I would go for months without writing. It was hard. And then I changed something into more of a story, more emotional, and my editor said, yeah, you need more emotion. What do you mean more emotion? So, but I do believe that the process, writing as a process, is valuable, and I encourage everyone to do it. Even if you handwrite it on a piece of notebook paper and burn it. Or if you want to do your notes and publish them, that's certainly fine. But I will advise you to be very careful where you put your thoughts. Like, you might not want to post it on the internet, because that can come back and bite you in the ass.